Hello and welcome to the conversation. We have come a long way, quite a few programs, and we wish to seek your support and constructive feedback on how we have done so far. The program is about all walk of life, people, their achievements and ideologies and so on. So today we have a guest in that series who is well known in the Tamil activists, within the activist. This is T.U. Senan. He's a Tamil writer, activist, a socialist. He works for Committee for Workers International and part of Tamil Solidarity. Senan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I understand your initial background is not activism and politics. You have done quite a lot before you chose to get into. Let's talk about your literature side of things, because that's what actually made you as who you are, because you write a lot in Tamil and well known in the Tamil circles in India as well as around the world. So how did it all happen? Why did you choose to write, and where did it all start?
Writing's been my passion from my childhood. Always wanted to be a writer. So started, but initially it was a struggle in terms of how, born in Sri Lanka, in the north of Sri Lanka, at the time of the struggle for independence was beginning, and studying in a Tamil school also, taken me towards politics. But at the same time, there was a kind of a movement in terms of literature and writings at the time, not very strong, but it didn't take me to a proper writing. But then traveling to India, but also participating in the struggle, and so also sharpened up quite a lot of writers in Eelam. The Eelam writers were very sharp in that sense, and I think I kind of reflect that section of writers who came up after kind of struggle began, who put their the ideas to the into the paper, and then started to writing deeper stories and literary works. So that's how it began. But then, when I moved to Europe, the various magazines started to come up. Even when I was in India, for example, I participated in a magazine dedicated to poetry, for example, and so on. At the time, there are a few writers came together, explored, and then we were able to kind of make our mark in a way, if I can put it that way, through some sharp stories and so on and so forth. And that's how it happened, and I'm still writing.
So the whole idea is bringing your identity along with your social protest, because you said in the conversation before that the whole idea of the resistance or idea of protest which came on your writing. Now, you actually mentioned independence. I'm pretty sure you're not talking about the Sri Lankan independence. You're talking about the Tamil independence, because it doesn't seem that old in the sense of I think it's about 60 years ago. Yeah. So the idea of this independence of the self-determination question, or the Tamil national question, it is perceived in different ways within the different ideologies. So, because since you actually started this, I just want to ask, from your socialist background, how are you viewing this? Because they have lots of misconception about the identity itself, because the identity is as Tamil as an identity, Tamil, Eelam Tamils. And then the question of the political solution and the political structure of the state, or is it going to be a state, or is it going to be a union, or whatever it is. Now, as a socialist, as an activist, as well as a writer, how are you viewing this?
We support the right to self-determination of the Tamil people, including separation. So that doesn't mean that the people, which means an independent homeland for a Tamil people, if that's what the majority of the Tamil people decided to do, and if that's what the majority of the Tamil people desire, which is true for kind of decades. But what we will insist on is that what kind of a society, we wouldn't stop there, what kind of a society that we need, what kind of a separate country you are talking about, what kind of a society we wanted to create. We don't want to have an independent state and live with all the oppressions, and then people who are suffering now continue to suffer. We don't want that situation. We want a situation, we wanted to create a better society in such a way that we can, people in the south will look up to us and develop their own society. People in the South Asian continent will look up to us and develop their own society. We could in the future can form a confederation so that we can share the wealth of the South Asian continent. This massive wealth exists in such a way, which one country cannot exist in relation to the resources. So how is that possible without developing a better society in each part of the world? And that is the proposal that we would fight for. That is the kind of a demand that we would fight for. Of course, on the question of the right to self-determination, there is no two way about it. For socialists, been fighting for a long, long time in terms for particularly for that right.
So let's come back to your literacy work. So when you say Eelam Tamil art or Eelam Tamil literacy, short stories, poems, but in terms of competing with the wider market, how popular Eelam Tamil poetry or Eelam Tamil literature, and how popular in the sense in terms of mass production, in terms of wider circulation or wider reach?
It's a very, very important question, because the Eelam literature, so-called Eelam writers, existed from Sangahalam, this ancient times. There's a Sangha poet called, the Eelam poet. So the thing is, but industry, even then, the Eelam poet, written in a Sangam collection, but that's published in Tamil Nadu. That has been a history through and throughout. It's partly because the number of people living in Eelam is very less in number. That number is less, so the distribution mechanism, you can establish, but it's limited. 60, 70 million Tamils living in India. That's a different question. But also, there is not there's no industry established as such for publication, for example, for a long time, because of the domination of the Tamil Nadu. Everybody, any good writer, just go there and publish it. So it's just the case in my case as well, that my book was published by the leading publisher in Tamil Nadu, Uyirmai, for example. So and then we also write in the magazines and so on and so forth there. So when the Eelam writers started to write and publish in Tamil Nadu, and then there is no way of developing any industry within Sri Lanka as such. So this is or in diaspora. So this is a major problem. So it doesn't exist at all, if you ask me. This is a problem that all the writers coming from the Tamil background in Sri Lanka faces. What kind of publisher we choose to publish. So then another point here is that if you want to be popular, if you want to really make your mark into a literature, if you're writing stories or poems or whatever it is, and then you cannot ignore the huge population that exists in Tamil Nadu and the tradition of literature and so on and so forth. So any Eelam writer wanted to be popular among them, want to be part of that tradition as well. So, but it can be happened if there is a proper traditional publishing house in.
No, I mean, before going to the publishing house,
Yeah.
I mean, the way you look at it is that the reach, in the sense of reach across the globe, right? Because almost 80 million or 90 million people read or use Tamil as a language, and it's spread across the whole world.
Absolutely.
And how it is received in the Western countries, in the sense like in the US or in Canada, or a large population in the Europe, how is it received, the kind of short stories or the kind of poetry work that you produce compared to what's coming from Tamil Nadu?
Yeah, but that's another interesting question, because the majority of the diaspora, the Tamils outside of India and Sri Lanka, majority coming from Sri Lanka, from Eelam Tamils. So mostly they read Eelam writing. But having said that, the literary works has very limited readership. Literary works, for example, it's quite surprising for me to want to talk about literature, for example. Most of the time I'm on TV talking about politics. Politics actually dominate our life. The literature is not like that. Not many people really, go and buy a literary book and read. The readership has gone down massively. So it's a limited number of people read in any way. So that's why it's kind of limited. Even in Tamil Nadu, it's the same thing as well. The leading magazine in Tamil Nadu, I don't know, maybe 5,000 copies. Oh, it's a dream for them to sell 5,000 copies. At the same time, Kumudam, for example, sells 600,000 copies every week. 600, just compare that. So it's commercial, basically. But then people like us, we want to reach the masses. If we want to reach, we have to rely on the commercial magazines in order to kind of write there and so on and so forth, then and then one or two pieces and so on to get noticed or something like that. So it's kind of confused situation in that sense. But readership is also, in general, is falling. Tamil reading, for example, most of the diaspora, the old generation is not reading. It's partly because they are living in an alienated kind of life. There is no place where they can go and read the Tamil papers or bookshop and so on. So only very recently, a first bookshop in Tamil is been set up in East Ham recently, just a few months back. So another problem we have is that most of the new generation, they don't read in Tamil. They read in their own languages, English, German, or French, and etc.
I mean, this is where it matters, because the wider audience, as you said, I mean, generally for literacy work, it's not much of an audience. But then within that, if you're actually writing in a diaspora environment, so I mean, it's easy to say that the society is not geared up for it. But then, as writers, what kind of tactics or what kind of things are you actually taking? Because if you really look at most of the novels, like for example, short stories, quite a lot, even the English short stories, the descriptions, the way the environment is actually portrayed and so on, it takes a lot. In terms of reading, like if you have a big massive book, people these days put off because of the electronic means, because of the you know, variety of media that's available. Because I mean, YouTube or any kind of media is quite popular. So as writers, are you doing anything different in terms of reaching out to those?
Absolutely. I mean, this is another important point. I'm glad you really asked that question, because this kind of dumb writing basically exists. Because certain industry is emerging in Tamil Nadu now. This has been used by some writers in order to kind of throw in books as just a commodity, just make money. But Elam writing, the Elam writers have a unique tradition, starting from Mona Talayasingham, Espo, to the recent writers. It has a unique tradition. It's a totally different. In the world level of literature, in international literary field, this particular uniqueness has never been addressed, never been kind of understood properly. It's only beginning to emerge recently. Only now we see few translations. It's never been a proper translations. Only on these translations, some of them are crap translations, I have to say, only just beginning to emerge. So the international literary circles, they really didn't understand the quality of the writings, quality of the Elam writers, particularly because you mentioned in terms of filling pages. We don't do that. We really sharp, extremely sharp. For example, just particularly after the struggle that started, there is another book called Nanjundakadu, recently published. You know, there are a lot of lists I can say, but Nanjundakadu, this is written by somebody who actually involved in the armed struggle. And then, you know, the perspective is totally different. If it's properly with a literary quality translated, it can take the kind of literary field by storm internationally. So that appreciation is not there. Some of the writings that we do, it's much more deeper. We don't write sentences and words randomly. Every word we choose to write has a meaning. Every sentence as we choose to write has a meaning. It's a choice. When you produce a book, when you produce a writing, it's a choice. You're making a choice, what to write, what not to write. So you cannot simply explain, randomly kind of narrate through your life just like that and call it a book. So, and that tradition exists in many cultures in many parts of the world, including in the Tamil culture.
I think
but that's very less of that kind of work exists in Elam writings.
You know, if you say it's very special in the literary side of it, have you especially, you know, presented yourself in literary festivals, so in around the world, and have you actually really reached out there? Because that is more niche and that is more artistic work rather than commercial.
Yeah, it's true, but nothing like that exists for Tamils. You know, Tamil literature. For English, yes, there are lots out there. So in English language is different. The Tamil language writers are different. The Tamil language writers, you know, only recently one thing that we all really proud of is the book fairs that takes place in Tamil Nadu. In January, the book fair takes place in Chennai, and the book fair actually now taking place in Madurai. And so on. So that's it's a big hit. People are buying books, you know, hundreds of thousands of rupees are spent on it in days and so on, which is a good news for writers, and that's the only thing. But there are a few literary meetings that takes place. and then literary kind of circles are formed. And this is the kind of life and day-to-day life of a Tamil writer. It doesn't go anything beyond it. It's partly there is a lack of money in it, but partly also it's not been properly established. And these are weaknesses you are outlining, because you cannot compete, of course, with the English literature, English language publications and writings and so on, because it's a massive mass audience, millions and multi-millions. But at the same time, Tamil field is not that inferior in any way. Like you said, 80 million audience. So we have to change the community into reading, thinking, political community, and then trying to kind of induce these kind of things. And it's only beginning. We mentioned about writers surviving. It's been a long history. From Sangha time, the poets have written about their poverty throughout most of the writings you can see. So the writers always lived in poverty. They have to write some dodgy songs about the king in order to get some money to feed themselves. And this has been a struggle for throughout. One of the greatest writers, like Pudumai Pittan, for example, have to survive by working something and then write on his spare time. But that is beginning to change now, little bit.
It's just beginning, and it's a long way to go in terms of the industry, in terms of pushing. I've actually seen some of your publications, which is like, one is the Kolemare Kamarasial, which is Uyirmai publication. And also you have actually done History of Resistance, and this is in English. This book talks about the history of the workers' rights and traditions. And so have you managed to actually distribute this, or have you managed to sell these?
Yeah, but this is a very successful book. It is History of Resistance, and both of them are successful books. History of Resistance particularly I would point out, because it's produced in diaspora, published by Tamil Solidarity in close links with the Socialist publication. And the first edition, they brought up some copies and they sold out, which just kind of tested the market. And then this particular book came up, and it's a massive hit. It's already in profit, and it's a good hit. But it's also like a lot of trade unionists, active labourers left across Europe, which is in English, though, so it's easy as well. But buying it, because no such thing exists. There are a lot of history books exist, but people who are involved in the struggle often ask the questions. Why this happened, why that happened, what's wrong with Buddhism? Is a peaceful religion. What's wrong with the Buddhism, for example? And why, these people, peaceful people, Tamil and Sinhalese, why they're fighting each other, for example? So basic questions, but there are historical processes behind it. So this is a book, is an attempt to give a very brief answer to these things, and there is no book exists like that. That's why it's selling.
So this is not just limited to Tamil literacy, you are actually writing in English as well. So what is your future projects? Have you got anything lined up for future?
So far, I haven't collected all my old writings into books.
This is a good, interesting point. Just I forgot to ask you, how many short stories or how many publications have you done so far?
I've written quite a lot of articles because of my political involvement recently. But short stories, I don't know, maybe about 15, maybe more. Number of poems, I don't have a proper count, and that's why I'm beginning to collect now. The Uyirmai is producing in Tamil Nadu, of course, again, another book, 10 articles written from 2009 to now, political articles, a collection of 10 articles has been published by Uyirmai. That's one book. The another book is an important book, is published by a new, fresh publication coming up in Jaffna called Ahayam Publication. There's young people trying to bring about a publication with an aspiration, massive aspiration of doing more work and publishing and so on. I decided to work with them in order to, of course, partly because promoting what is taking place there, and also I wanted to collect my old writings. So six short stories and one novel, a short novel, collected together as a book. I think that would be an interesting book to read.
Because this is interesting, because when you say that publishers or supporting publishers, or the publishers is a key factor in terms of bringing out, but in the Western settings, is there any Tamil publishers?
It's not publisher as such, but there is one initiative that is taking place. They have published some books, But it is very difficult to categorize as a diaspora publication. They work closely with the Tamil Nadu and so on. And they have brought out some books, and it's a collective. They're trying to bring together people together, put in money, because it's a question of finance as well. And then trying to come up with the books, and they are struggling for money already, and they're linking up with the Tamil Nadu and so on. But yeah, right. If you ask me a straight answer to that, no, nothing.
From your writing work or your literature work, let's actually move into your political activism. You are very active within the Tamil Solidarity movement, also with the Committee for Workers International. And Committee for Workers International existed for a long time, and actually have spread out across the world in campaigns and so on. So what kind of role you play, and can you bring in your perspective of how you actually, or what kind of role you play in that organization?
It's a big question, because it's a socialist international, which leads struggles actually in more than 50 countries, and building worker struggles. And we believe that the role of the working class, the working people in each country, can play a decisive role in changing the society for better. So it takes place, this particular struggle. It comes from a scientific understanding about how society changes historically and so on and so forth. And then so this kind of struggle takes place in every single country there is, including North Korea, even though it's a low level, maybe at times and so on. It's a struggle exists. The dominant mode of production is a capitalist mode of production, which is understood and accepted by majority of the analysis. But what we would say is that we give emphasis to the struggle. So what we work with in many countries to build this particular struggle in order to better the life.
So in regards to Tamil Solidarity, I have seen in action like the Tamil Solidarity have really got a young following and wanted to build more and more. So within universities you're quite active. So what you would like to share about the objectives and what you're actually doing currently?
Yeah, I'm a member of Tamil Solidarity, and at the moment this campaign is led by young people. That's one of the things, like you said, and majority young women, which is unique in a campaign which is unique in a sense that people thought it's lost, but it's not unique in a sense that traditionally women in Ilam struggle, for example, participated quite actively. So we wanted to bring back the tradition of struggle. We don't want to lose it just because there is a massive campaign going on about, oh, we got to forget about everything, we just finish that and we move on and start and so on. That's one thing. But also the young generation, the new generation want answers. They don't just want to enter struggle and then, oh yeah, you talk the talk, what is happening? Or you just do the work, what actually the meaning of it? So we want idea and activism. So activists with an idea. So people need to understand what they're doing. At the same time, the meaning, there should be a meaning what they're doing, and also do things to change things. So this is why we're trying to take these ideas into the ideas of struggle, political ideas of struggle, into the universities. Because so far in the universities and societies and so on, they dealt with all functions and some entertainment and dance and all those programs and so on, which is good, which is important. At the same time, cultural activities are important. At the same time, we also need to do political work. So that's the kind of emphasis that we put in.
Let me just wanted to lead from something you said, that you said we didn't want to lose the tradition of women participation, especially young women participation. And you also said that in the tradition there was quite a lot of young activists, women activists who actually led the whole struggle. Now, why do you think there is kind of why are we missing that in current settings, especially in all political parties or political arena within the struggle, like as you specifically said? And why do you think that gap existed after, even though within the society, I'm sure that's about 70% is women dominated, because it's women, 70% is women. The artificial effects, what has happened due to war, due to so many aspects. So what has actually led to this gap?
I think there are many factors involved in this. As you know, a huge number of people participated in the protest in 2009. Majority students, young people, and it was shocking, and it was frightening for the establishment. But what happened is that how to counter it took place in many ways by Sri Lankan government, also I would say the government and establishment here. But then also the family aspect of it as well. That time everybody was frustrated, everybody was sickened by what is taking place in the massacre. They let loose their kids to go and do what they want to do, but they held them back afterwards. Partly because of the cultural aspect and education and so on, but also they're not sure what kind of a politics they're going to be associated with. Because of the divisions and all these things start to emerge. These are factors. But at the same time, we have to also blame people like us, for example, who wanted to lead this campaign and so on, and what kind of a politics we are giving to these young people to come and struggle. We also have to look at that particular point of view as well, in terms of how we're going to engage this.
My specific question was about women participation, because traditionally, I mean, that was the truth, and you have actually said that women led the struggle in various aspects, and it's quite a lot of social activism in very much grassroots levels. Now, so that culture cannot be just the reason, it should be something else.
Particularly on the question of women, but it's the same, not just our community, Tamil communities, it's also Pakistani community, Indian community, all these things. It's certain exclusiveness maintained, a certain kind of, because of this failure of so-called multiculturalism project, for example, certain exclusiveness is maintained, poverty and so on. It's a protective mechanism. People live on their own, maintain their culture and language and everything, which is good and bad at the same time. Because in that way, the element of freedom is much less for a Tamil woman to go and do whatever they want to do. So that is one aspect. The another aspect is that there is any room for them to do it? What kind of an organization they can be part of it and do, express their freedom, at the same time fight for the freedom of the people. So there is room for that? Why would I have to kind of discuss this, with other organization and leading people and so on, whether are we providing that actually? The main concern, most of my life now involved, is building the fight back, the struggle. My message would be to engage in politics. Politicize yourself, politicize your family, and we cannot escape it.
So the message from Sainan is engage in politics, get active, participate, and we talked about quite a various aspects, from writing, establishing publications and how publishing world involves, and quite a lot of stuff. And also we have talked about socialist elements and his involvement with the Committee for Workers International and so on. But the key message is, and what he was actually given today, is engage in politics, see what's happening around. So with that note, let's conclude this program. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you. Thank you very much.